Hi, I'm Tom Stevenson and welcome to Construction Business Management. In this course, we are looking at how to plan and run a successful construction business. In this next series of videos, we're going to be looking at the sales process and the closing process and how to grow your business from the marketing side of things. It includes a lot of things that you need to know and that you may not be doing. And if you are wanting to run a successful business, there's actually a lot of knowledge and practice and skills that are behind that. So we'll dive into that. And we're going to be looking at today how to develop a credible process for finding, qualifying, and retaining clients. We want to identify and apply the key components of the sales process to your repertoire of skills. A lot of construction people, they come from the tools, or they come from a particular discipline of knowledge, be that project management or construction management, but they often don't think of all the skills required to actually sell and close on a bid and to make sure that they're able to actually secure their share of work. You spend a lot of time and effort coming up with a costing for a project. And if you can just shift that sort of needle another 20% in your favor, that you're getting more of the projects that you bid on through successful sales and negotiation skills, that'll put you in a much better position financially and from a profitability point of view. I'm going to go over this, and I brought this up in probably the last 2 or 3 videos. Oh, and by the way, if you click the subscribe button and you look under the playlist Construction Business Management, you'll see the rest of the videos in this series for the whole course, starting right from the beginning, where we talked about goals and missions and values, to where we went through the financial statements, to this point where we're actually looking at the marketing and sales aspects of a construction business. And there's these 4 key points that really, quite frankly, any business needs to think about. You know, increase your client base. For example, if you currently have 100, how do you increase it to 150 clients? Whatever number it is. If you have 10 clients, how do you increase it to 20 clients? That will for sure increase your sales. And if you've outlined the markup covering your overhead and your profit, then you will be doing much better as a business. So it's the coming together of a bunch of spokes on the wheel, so to speak. Raise your prices. Well, a lot of times we undervalue what we are selling. We don't really recognize the value that others see in what we sell. And so we may be selling ourselves short, essentially. We may be getting a lot of work but not making much money off of it. And do we really want to be the low-cost producer in our market segment? Somebody has to be the low-priced producer, but maybe that's not us. Maybe that's not our particular market segment that we're going after. Of course, if we can have more frequency in the transactions, that's going to allow us to be more successful too. So if we've got the same client buying from us more frequently, that's a big plus. That means that we could keep the same 100 clients, but now they're buying from us twice as often. We've essentially doubled our sales. And if we've got the right profit margin, we doubled our profit margin. Increase the average size of each transaction. Well, that ties into a lot of this, what we'll be talking about as well. You know, what are the options? Are you providing your client with the right number of options that really sort of meets their needs and requirements? They call it upselling a lot of the time, where you can increase what you're selling, but also what you're trying to do is add real value to your client. But to add real value, you really have to understand your clients, as we've talked about in some of the previous videos. And if we got that good knowledge base and we're able to provide packages that really are attractive to that client, then we have a much higher likelihood of selling to them. And that can be a very, very strong possibility. One contractor could come in and they got this one option, is too much. And basically the client's like put off by it. You could come in with the same package that's too much, but also have other packages that might be lesser or might be more encompassing of something else that they want to do in the future. And they might, once they start, want to expand what they're doing and just get it over with. That happens a lot in construction as well. So the sales, the end result of this aspect of successful marketing that we've been talking about is actually the sale. And it's a profession unto itself. But you know what? Everybody is selling all the time. You sell basically which restaurant do you want to go eat at. You sell which car do you want to buy as a family. There's always this sales that goes on, and the other aspect is negotiation. I'll have another video where we'll dive into sales and negotiation, because there's a lot of sort of techniques out there. Anything that's a profession unto itself, there's people that are really good at it, and there's people that are not good at it. And as a business owner, you want to become very good at the sales process. A lot of people don't like it. A lot of people don't like having rejection, but there's a definite winning formula that will get you more success by really studying it and practicing it. It's one of those things you really have to practice. Practice makes perfect. And long-term success is also understanding that long-term success is about that relationship that you build and have with your clients. So sales is an important fundamental aspect. So when we think about the traditional sales approach, we can break it down into 5 areas. You know, there's a number of ways that we can look at the space between the spaces, so to speak, but there really are 5 different areas on the sales approach. There's the marketing approach. Well, how do I get the lead in the first place? And we've talked about that, you know, the different ways that you can advertise and get a lead to contact you. But that's great. But how do we show our prospects how professional we are and how basically we are somebody that they want to do business with? The construction industry, you know, it ranks right up there with car mechanics, that people are very skeptical, very cautious, and rightfully so. I can't think of anything more than you would be spending more money on than construction work, really, when it comes down to it, right? So if it's a business-to-business relationship, it's still going to be a lot of money. If it's a business-to-customer relationship, it's still going to be a lot of money. So people are on guard and concerned. So the first thing you really want to try to do is come across professionally. So the approach is very important. Warm up. Your goal is to warm up, is to get the potential client to like you and to trust you. So between showing your professionalism and building a trust and a relationship there with the client is very important. And it's important that you're genuine about this. You know, if you're fake about this, it's not going to do what you want it to do. And especially in construction, where we want to retain 80% of the clients we do get for future work. We want them to think about us as their long-term contractor. And so that's something that you really, because people are really concerned. So if you belay those concerns and you execute on what you say, then you are building a long-term relationship, which is building your business for the long game, not just the short game. Qualifying. Oh, we'll talk about this too. Qualifying. You don't want to work for everybody necessarily. They're qualifying you, right? And you should qualify them. In construction, a lot of contractors, quite frankly, are very busy. So actually getting enough clients often isn't the issue. It's getting the right clients, because if you get the wrong clients, yeah, I got a ton of clients, but I'm losing money on every 2 out of 10 jobs that I do. And those 2 that I lose money on take most of the profit from the other 8 that I actually made money on. So trying to qualify the clients is important, and we'll be diving into that in the upcoming lectures. Presentation. Well, you want to be professional, and that people have a lot of difficulty talking to other people and doing a presentation and explaining the breakdowns, and they can get jumbled up. We're not talking about presenting to 100 people or something. We're talking about presenting to clients, but that can be very unnerving for somebody that, let's say, has a construction background, is used to working on project sites, but not used to professionally presenting a proposal to a client. So really, you want to develop skills in that area. And I always think of Winston Churchill, who was known as one of the best speakers of the 20th century, and how in 1908, when he had to present in Parliament, and he was a young, basically a young parliamentarian in England, and he had to present and he forgot his words. and he got all muddled up and he went and sat down because he couldn't get his head together. And in the papers the next day it said, this young Winston Churchill, he's mentally inept, not suitable for an elected position. Winston Churchill. And Winston Churchill vowed after that he would get better at doing presentations. He worked it. For decades he worked it, so that by the time 1939 rolled around in World War II, he was the right person at the right time in the right job. So anybody can improve whatever level you're starting at in their presentation skills, including myself. I'm always trying to figure out how can I do things a little bit better. And I think it's helped me over the years, for sure, considering where I started by reading out of a book to a classroom. You definitely get much better as you go if you put the time and effort into trying to improve on that. But we will discuss that as well. The close. Well, they call it the close. The goal of the close is to leave with the contract already signed, or follow up and close the contract. Well, this kind of depends what you're doing. If you're in construction and you're dealing with other businesses, you're likely not going to close by delivering a price. They may be taking bids in. It may be a closed bid process, and then basically they'll select the bid based on the lowest price. If it's a government agency, they'll have a public tender opening where they'll actually open up the bids. They'll call out the actual pricing, and you would have had to have been pre-qualified yourself to bid on that, and it might have been secured with an actual bid bond. In that case, it will definitely go to the lowest bidder as long as everything is in place and it fits the budget of the government agency. And it'll probably take a few weeks, or even in some cases a couple of months, before they actually come out and award you the contract. So those are some differences there. But essentially, though, if you're in the residential sector, you would definitely want to try to have everything ready, that if the client seems obliging to go ahead with it, that you have a contract and they quickly sign it, and then you're ready to go. Because if you leave it, then people will have times, well, maybe we should get another price, or maybe we should rethink this part of it. But once they actually sign up, then they're typically a client that way. I don't mean to be, in construction, you don't want to be pushy, you don't want to seem desperate, you just want to seem prepared with that. And there's an old saying in negotiation, if you don't ask, you don't get. And so one of the things with the close is that you're ready there, and you can also say, we can put you into our schedule, and we could start in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month, whatever the time frame is, but you're giving them a date from when you think you can start if they sign up today, which would be a fair assumption, because you should know how your projects are coming up and how you're scheduling things, and you can lock them in. Otherwise, you can't really lock them in if you don't know you have a project. So that's the aspect of the close. And a lot of unskilled contractors don't make the ask, and so they've lost that opportunity. And that could cost them a good 25% of their jobs that they could have potentially had, or even more. Follow-up is also important, and we'll get into that as well. But basically, we want to make sure that the follow-up occurs when you're not able to close, when you did your presentation, and you want to see if you can make the close, right? So you're following up. Maybe you didn't make your close. You want to do some follow-up. And if you're not receiving the contract, you also want valuable feedback so you can make improvements in the future. I always would do that with clients. And when you present your quote to the client, the other thing is that you want to be very professional. And I find that I actually had a little bit of a business going just on how well I took it when a client would tell me that we didn't get the project. I would be super nice. I'd be over the top nice. Oh, that's fine. That's okay. I fully understand that. If you have any problems at all, or if you have any other work in the future, I'd be more than happy to quote this for you. I really enjoyed working with you up to this point to get the quote, and I think it would be great for us to do business in the future. I've had clients literally, if it was done on the phone, where it's always better on person, but where they've hung up the phone and they've called me back in a half an hour to say, you know what, we've been thinking about this really deeply, we'd actually like to go with the contract with you. We just didn't have the same feeling with the other contractor, right? So it can make a huge, huge difference. Actually, my favorite client that I worked for decades ago was he owned Ray Gordon Equipment Company. This was this large construction equipment company. They sold. They had a dominant position in Ontario, Canada, and then they sold it to United Rentals. But we just kind of clicked and helped him working with the architect who was designing the project from a budgeting point of view in the early processes. And this was actually a connection we got through our plumbing contractor, where this plumbing contractor would also act as a general contractor sometimes. So they'd have a client, just trying to show you how the different businesses go together. Business to business to customer, and how they integrate, like we talked about in a previous video. So this plumbing contractor basically did their bathroom, did this master bathroom, and we did all the carpentry work for that. So we were their subcontractor. You know, usually we were always the GC, but because we kind of always did work with this same plumbing subcontractor, we kind of went both ways with things. We'd be their subcontractor, they'd be our subcontractor. It just depended, right? And which is a great relationship, business to business relationship. And so they were interested in like bathrooms and anything to do with plumbing. They weren't interested in doing like a $500,000 addition onto the house and a whole bunch of other work, right? And so this client contacted us based through the plumber, because they had asked the plumber if they knew a good general contractor, and the plumber said us, and that we had already worked on their house. And so they wanted me to actually help sort of work with the architect to have a budget. But first they actually wanted the architect, and I referred the architect to them. So you can see how all this is working together, the referral process, because I had worked with this architect on a previous project. And so they actually started the design, and we were doing the budgets. And it came time for the pricing. And of course, the architect got a few other contractors to bid on it, because they wanted to make sure that they weren't paying too much. And we were a little bit more expensive than the lowest price contractor. It wasn't like on a $500,000 job. I think we were like $4,000 or $5,000. So in the big scheme of things, not a ton of money. But you do know how financial statements work and how profit and overhead works, as we've talked about in the previous videos. So we were a little bit high, but the big point was we couldn't start for, I think it was 5 weeks. We were very busy all the time. We were very busy. And so we said 5 weeks. This other contractor could start like, in 3 days. Well, that would be one question. I'd wonder how during busy times they could start in 3 days. But anyways, and so that I got the phone call after we had submitted the bids, because it had to be put in by a certain time, done through an architect's office, exact bid process. And he said, "I'm very sorry, we're going to go with the other contractor. Your pricing is pretty online, but we just want to get it started, etc." And I said, "Oh, sorry about that. I'm always straight up with my clients. If we can't start right away, I say that. We could always do a token start, but I don't like to mislead my clients, and this is how we typically do things. I've enjoyed so much working with you, and I think in future we'll have great opportunities together. Please keep us in mind." So that's the example I was saying. After about 20 minutes, phone back, "You know what? We want you to do the job." Not only did we get that job, but we got several $1 million worth of work after that as well. I often think about that, because to be honest, I was not happy, because I spent a lot of time on the budgeting process. And honestly, there was kind of a little thing that went on between us and the architect too. I felt like the architect was pushing the other contractor that they had referred. So there was all this kind of background stuff. But to the client, you want to be professional. And I'm sincere. I really like that client. Probably the best client I ever ended up working with. We just gelled, and everything made so much sense. It was a lot of enjoyment. And so I think I learned a lot from that. You definitely don't want to burn bridges, and you want to be as professional as possible, and you move on. If they don't call you again, that's fine. But I can tell you, I had a lot of people call me back. when I lost projects, is they'd start the project and maybe then with this other contractor it went south. And a lot of construction projects do go south, especially if somebody really underpriced you, and they end up calling you back. And usually at that point I would go in as a cost plus contract. So we would fix things based on cost plus, because you never know what somebody started something else, what you're getting into. But it worked out for a few years to be an excellent business model, and it really brought in a lot of revenue. So you really got to kind of look at these 6 elements: approach, warm up, qualifying, presentation, close, follow up, and work them. And when you don't get a project, ask yourself, why didn't you get the project, and what could you improve upon? And work that, because some of you might be golden on approach and warm up, but not so good on qualifying. Others might be horrible on approach, and it just goes a number of different ways. I want to dive into this in a little bit more detail, and I want to do a separate video where we kind of just get into each of the areas. And the areas I took from this, actually years ago, I took this from this old Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation document that they had, which was really how to close sales and build client relations for a construction-based business. I've kind of updated things for the purposes of today that it makes much more sense. And the other area that I also want to dive into a little bit is negotiating the contract and negotiation skills in general. So I'm going to do a quick short video on just the negotiating side of things, because there's a lot of there's so much there. There's just so much there that, depending on you, how you have been in the past, your culture, your upbringing, your personality, there's a lot of factors that go in, and then who you're dealing with as far as being able to successfully negotiate a contract that you're okay with, that you're satisfied with. Because very often, the other problem we have with running a construction business, very often we win the contract and then we have buyer's remorse. Like, how are we going to do this now? Or why did we agree to this after the fact? And then we end up losing money on it. And as a small to medium-sized business, you don't want to have very many of those types of projects. You want to try, you're never going to get rid of all of them, but you definitely want to be conscious of them. And you want to grow the ones that are super profitable, and you want to minimize the ones that aren't. So that's what I wanted to cover in today's video lecture, but I'm going to have right after this one, if you look on the subscribe playlist, Construction Business Management, you'll see video 9B, which will be taking it deeper into these particular 5 areas: initial contact and inspection, the things that we need to do, things about prospect information and background, your client, your view of the client, preparation, testimonials. We need to get testimonials. We need to get people that have been happy with the work we've done. We need raving fans that are helping to market for us. Nothing is better. A Google ad is not going to do the same as a client that is over the moon happy with the project you did and is telling their friends and neighbors about it. Nothing is going to be better than that. And also, it's going to be in your geographical area. We've talked about that, right? Place, and that's going to be helpful as well. So testimonials, providing advice to clients. We'll be diving into that. So making sure you're not self-serving about it. That's building on the trustworthy side. The aspect of presenting the estimate, negotiating the contract, as we said, and I'm also going to have a separate pullout on that one. Performing the work, you're going to be there, you're going to be in the client's premises, or you're going to be building this project for the client, whether it's a office project or whether it is a residential project. You're going to be performing the work. So how well are you doing during that process in updating them and communicating with them and making sure that you're meeting those needs? And follow-up, service, and warranty. You got to bring it home. You got to close it out, and you've got to make sure that if there's any after the fact things that you tie them up, because that could be enough that one little thing that the client now doesn't want to call you for the next project. You got to make sure that you take it all the way home. Don't stop short with it. So that's what I wanted to give you, this sort of lead into the process and the steps of actually selling and closing the deal, right? So selling and closing the deal. And we'll get into it in the next video. So I'm Tom Stevenson, and I just want to remind you, click subscribe, click the notifications to see updates to this video and others in the construction community that we're building. And I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time. Bye for now.